Good morning, students. Today I will take the class related to vitamins. As you know, we have already initiated the topic of vitamins, wherein we have covered various parts of vitamins, especially the the nutrition, the nutritional value, and the daily requirements, the concept of dietary reference intakes, and we have spoken about the fat soluble vitamins, and we have spoken about the water soluble vitamins. We further discussed about the roles of vitamins in promoting health, wherein we have discussed about the vitamin absorption and storage. We have covered both the fat soluble vitamin and the water soluble vitamin digestion and absorption. We have discussed and what parts of the intestine and these vitamins gets absorbed, and also to which system they go. So this slide shows that the both are absorbed in small intestine, and the water soluble vitamins get into the blood, whereas the fat soluble vitamins get into the lymphatic system. The fat soluble vitamins can be stored for a long period of time, whereas the water soluble vitamin have to be taken on daily basis. So we have also covered about the bioavailability, the destruction of vitamins, and the toxicities and overconsumption of vitamins, and the concept related to provitamins and preformed vitamins. We initiated the topic of vitamin A, and we have shown that how the vitamin A is being a very good antioxidant due to the presence of a lot of double bonds in its structure, and we have also studied that the importance of this vitamin in terms of the vision, wherein about 500,000 people worldwide are affected due to the night blindness. So we have also spoken about the discovery, wherein two independent groups in 1913, the McCollum and Davis, and the second group Osborn and Mendel, how they discovered the two factors in cod liver oil, wherein one component was easily inactivated by heat in the presence of air, which we call as vitamin A, whereas the other component was stable, and this was vitamin D. So the vitamin A, we discussed that it composed of three different biologically active molecules: the retinol, which has an alcohol group, the retinal, and the retinoic acid, which has the carboxylic group. So this is the structures of all trans retinol, the 11 cis retinol, and the beta carotene. So also the beta carotene, it consists of two molecules of retinol which are linked at their aldehyde ends, which we can see here, and thereby they are referred to as provitamin form of vitamin A. So most of the ingested beta carotene is cleaved in the intestine by beta carotene dioxygenase to yield the retinol. So functions also we discussed earlier, and I would like to give a very short recap of it. So we spoke about in the vision, the rod cells of the retina contains the pigment rhodopsin, which is nothing but 11 cis retinol, which is bound to opsin. Whereas when the light falls on this rhodopsin, it dissociates or it bleaches, and it gives rise to all trans retinal and opsin, two separate components, and this reaction is accompanied by conformational changes in this protein opsin, wherein it induces the calcium flux, which in turn triggers the nerve impulse and allows the light to be perceived by the brain, wherein we can see an image. So all trans retinol is incompletely converted to 11 cis retinol, and we need, for the constant supply of 11 cis retinol for rhodopsin formation, all trans retinol is really required in the diet. We discussed in detail the structure of retina and the eye, wherein we have seen the various parts of the eye, and we spoke about that retina is the innermost layer of the eyeball, and this has layers of pigmented cells which are layers of rods and cones which have photoreceptors, and there are also the bilayers, the bipolar cells, and the layer of ganglion cells. So herein we have an optic nerve wherein it goes to the brain and you can perceive the image. So we have also discussed upon exposure to light. So what are the changes which takes place? So upon light stimulation of rhodopsin, it leads to activation of G proteins, which is called transducin, and this further activates the G protein, and which in turn activates the cyclic GMP phosphodiesterase, which is nothing but PDE. And this PDE hydrolyzes the cyclic GMP and it reduces its concentration, and thereby it opens the sodium channels. Further, so due to this, there can be so this figure shows how the changes in the cyclic GMP level. For example, if the cyclic GMP is high upon exposure to light, so this can have impact on the membrane potential, and wherein in the dark they are depolarized, and so there is a tonic release of the neurotransmitters into the bipolar neurons. Whereas on the other side, upon the exposure to light, the activated retinal and the opsin, we said it gets bleached and it activates the protein transducin, which decreases the cyclic GMP, and the sodium channel closes, and thereby the membrane hyperpolarizes, and this hyperpolarization leads to the neurotransmitter release and which decreases in proportion to the amount of light. So there are various important functions which are important for proper development of epithelial cells and differentiation of these epithelial cells. The vitamin A serves as very important component of these. It supports the growth. It is essential for the activity of the epiphyseal cartilage, and also it is very important. Vitamin A is important and it has important role to play in the fertility, especially the spermatogenesis is arrested in animals in the absence of vitamin A. And the major sources here, and you can see the major sources are the cords and the cod liver oils, the shark oils, and the halibut oils. So the beta carotene is high in green vegetables such as spinach, the yellow vegetables such as carrots, tomatoes, and pumpkins, and the yellow fruits such as papaya and mangoes. So the cod liver oil, which I showed earlier, so it contains about 600 micrograms per teaspoon, and the shark liver oil contains about 300 microgram of vitamin A per teaspoon. So 1 microgram of retinol is equivalent to 3.33 international units, and normal requirement for men is about 1000 micrograms, for women is about 800 micrograms per day, and during pregnancy and lactation there is an additional requirement of 300 to 350 microgram. So vitamin A is metabolized mainly it is ingested in the beta carotene as a beta carotene or retinol, and the intestinal mucosa splits this carotene to retinol and is incorporated into the chylomicrons, and wherein it reaches the liver via the lymph and the blood. There is a limit on convertibility of beta carotene to retinol. So further, The excess of vitamin A, if you take a lot of vitamin A, it is stored in the liver as fatty acid esters, and these esters are stable, more stable than the alcohols. And the protein, retinol binding protein, is very important. And then further, they are secreted from the liver to the plasma. So the retinol and the retinol binding protein complex forms 1:1 complex with the prealbumin in the plasma, and this complex transports the vitamin A to the target tissues where a receptor on the cell surface mediates its uptake and is transported in the cell by cellular RBP. So this can be measured, the vitamin A can be measured using a colorimetric assay using antimony trichloride in a chloroform solution, where this color can be read at 620 nanometers. So this is vitamin A is very stable by normal cooking, but it can be destroyed for prolonged periods if it is exposed to air or heat drying. So the deficiency is not common in the Western countries, but it may occur in children with cystic fibrosis and or malnutrition, or in alcoholic conditions. So it can be treated with intake of about 30,000 international units of vitamin A orally. So there are various deficiencies which are associated with vitamin A. So the vitamin A levels below 20 microgram per 100 ml of serum indicates its inadequate content in the body. So the epithelial cells cannot differentiate in its absence, and the mucous membranes becomes very rough and dry, which may cause low resistance for microbial invasion, and the skin also becomes dry, and this condition is called xeroderma, wherein there is a scaly skin. It also leads to, its deficiency can lead to urinary tract infections, and a tendency for stone formation have been able to be ascribed to vitamin A deficiency. You can see here there is a scaly skin, and so the skin has a problem, as well as the eyes. You can see the blurred vision. So there is no tears in the eyes, which we call it xerophthalmia, and the poor tooth formation can also be noticed. So night blindness is one of the major conditions which is encountered due to the deficiency of vitamin A, and this is very common in the developing nations. And the night blindness is the difficulty of the eyes to adjust to the dim light. Especially the individuals are unable to distinguish between the images in low levels of illumination, and the people with night blindness have poor vision in darkness. But in the normal light, they can see normally. So the xerophthalmia, which is a medical condition, is seen in case in which the eye fails to produce the tears. You can see here the dry eyes, and which may lead to the conjunctival dryness and damage, and the complete blindness can also occur due to the vitamin A deficiency, because this has a major role in phototransduction, which we have seen in the earlier slides. So the phototransduction, as I described before, is a process by which the light is converted to the electrical signals in the cells of the retina of the eye. The other conditions are xerosis cornea. So that means the dryness of this eye can spread to the cornea, and it can lead to the keratinization of the epithelial cells of the cornea. Keratomalacia is a condition when the xerosis of the cornea and the conjunctiva is not treated, and it may develop to a condition called keratomalacia, which means degeneration of the corneal epithelium, and it produces opacities, and the cornea becomes more vascularized. You can see here the vascularization, and more edema, which means bulging, and the accumulation of water, and infiltrated with leukocytes. So you can see the redness of the eye. They have a lot of the blood cells, and this leads to the destruction of the cornea, and finally leading to blindness. Xerophthalmia is extreme dryness and keratinization, and the cloudiness of the eyeball, particularly in infants and the youngs. The vitamin E deficiency also diminishes the ability to fight to infections, and even the subclinical deficiency may lead to many other problems such as developing respiratory and diarrheal infections. They may have decreased growth rate, slow bone development, and they have problems with probability of survival from serious illness becomes less. And so in addition to the dietary problems, there are other causes of vitamin A deficiency. Iron deficiency can also affect the vitamin A uptake. Excess consumption of alcohol can deplete the vitamin A content, and the stress level may also be more susceptible to vitamin A toxicity. The hypervitaminosis of vitamin A refers to either excessive intake of vitamin A, and this may occur and wherein the maximum limit of the liver stores of retinoids is exceeded, and this will enter into the circulation and causing the systemic toxicities. So the retinoids, these are the class of the chemical compounds that are related to vitamin A, and they are sometimes used as medicines, primarily because they are able to regulate the epithelial cell growth. And they have also roles in cell proliferation and differentiation, bone tissue growth, and the immune function, and they are involved in activation of tumor suppressor genes. So due to the hypervitaminosis, there can be symptoms due to the toxicity such as nausea, vomiting, headache, dizziness, blurred vision, and loss of muscular coordination. So the hypervitaminosis vitamin A can also lead to angular cheilitis, which is inflammation in the lesions in the lips are cracked and there are splits, and this may also lead to bleeding problems. So the angular cheilitis or the severe angular cheilitis can lead to a bleeding in the corners of the lips. The second important vitamin is vitamin D, which is a fat-soluble vitamin, and it is also known as calciferol due to its role in calcium absorption. We know that the main role of is to maintain the calcium and potassium levels, and it is the only fat-soluble vitamin that can be made in the presence of light and which requires cholesterol. So this can be also stored in the fat tissues, and mostly the problem of this comes in people. It cannot be synthesized properly in elderly people and the people who are closed indoors for long periods of time. And we get vitamin D also from fortified milk and the cereals. So if you take too much, it may lead to also toxicities, and it may cause the kidney stones due to the calcium deposits, and heart and blood vessels can also get affected. So the vitamin D in this picture, you can see this small kid having problems with vitamin D, and which lead to which is linked to the calcium absorption. There are bone deformities, and also this is a common problem in the shut-ins and wherein there is a lack of sunlight exposure. So the primary material or the molecule from where the vitamin D biosynthesis takes place is 7-dehydrocholesterol and ergosterol, which in the presence of light gets converted to cholecalciferol and ergocalciferol, vitamin D3 and vitamin D2. So these cholecalciferol and ergocalciferol in the presence of certain enzymes such as hydroxylases can get converted to 1,25-dihydroxy vitamin D3 and 1,25-dihydroxy vitamin D2, which are the active forms of the vitamin. So like I mentioned, in the case of vitamin A also, the Goldblatt and Zilwa, they identified two factors in the cod liver oil one which was stable, which is called as vitamin D, and the other one which was easily be able to be inactivated by heat in the presence of air, which is vitamin A. So the vitamin D is destroyed, can be destroyed by rancidity, um, and this the microorganisms and the plants usually cannot synthesize it. So, so the ergosterol is majorly present from plant origin, and the 7-dehydrocholesterol is mostly from the animal foods. It can get converted, like I said earlier, it can get converted to ergocalciferol, vitamin D2, and cholecalciferol, vitamin D3, and which happens in the presence of light by photolysis to form the provitamin form. Further, this provitamin by thermal activation rearranges slowly to vitamin D. So the major sources, food sources are fish oils and egg yolk, butter, which contains some vitamin D. So the one international unit has the activity of 0.025 micrograms of pure crystalline vitamin D2. So this is required, increases as the new skeletal tissue to be built increases. So the pregnant and the lactating woman requires 10 microgram per day, and the young adults require 7.5 microgram per day, and above 25 years people require about 5 microgram per day. So the absorption is and the metabolism of vitamin D takes place with the help of bile salts, which are required for its absorption. So as you know, the bile salts increase the surface area and they break the fats, and the transport these is further absorbed and transported to the livers, to the chylomicrons in the intestinal tissue. And the vitamin D binding protein, which is also synthesized in the liver complexes with the globulin and forms the vitamin D binding protein alpha 2 globulin complex, and it gets circulated. So the vitamin D is released into the plasma, is hydroxylated. So you have seen the structure earlier. It has two hydroxyl groups, one at position 25 and other at position 1. So initially the vitamin D that is released into the plasma is hydroxylated at the 25th position, giving rise to calcifidiol, whereas it further hydroxylated at first position in the mitochondria of the proximal tubules of the kidney cortex, and it gives rise to 125 hydroxy vitamin D, which is called as calcitriol. So after activation, the vitamin is metabolized and excreted via the bile, and the concentration of the calcitriol is 10 to 30 nanograms per milliliter. So this we will talk into more details how the vitamin D is important in the bone health, how it maintains the calcium homeostasis. So it is very important in maintaining the plasma calcium homeostasis in conjugation with parathyroid hormone. And this is very important for bone metabolism, its structure, maintenance of the cellular and the neuronal functions. When the serum calcium decreases, the parathyroid hormone is stimulated and high levels of parathyroid hormone is released. And this stimulates the hydroxylation of calcifidiol to calcitriol in the kidney, and the calcitriol is the most potent form of the vitamin. And it could have multiple effects, particularly on the epithelial cells of the gastrointestinal tract to absorb more calcium and phosphorus. It signals that, and it releases the flux of calcium to plasma from the fluid compartment of the bone. And it signals the distal tubules of the kidneys to stop excreting the calcium and to reabsorb from the urine. As a result of these effects, the immediate increase in the levels of calcium in the plasma is achieved, and the effect is at the gene level because it involves an increase in the synthesis of proteins, in the absorption and reabsorption of calcium and phosphorus. So the dietary deficiency leads to is due to the reduced sun exposure, and particularly people who are pregnant, who are indoors most of the time, and they eat cereals as the main food. So also the people who have malabsorption due to the bowel diseases or um, due to the post-surgical causes, and the renal tubular acidosis or chronic renal failure, and certain uses of anticonvulsants. So they may have these experienced deficiency. So the deficiency can lead to inadequate absorption of calcium and phosphorus from the intestine, impaired mineralization of the bones and teeth, and softer bones which cannot withstand the weight of the body, and thereby they can elongate. Here you can see in this picture very clearly the elongation of the bones. This is a fully developed rickets with the characteristic the head is box shaped, and due to the softening of the skull, there is a bulging of the forehead region, and there is an enlargement of the wrists, knees, and ankle joints, and there is a widening of the bones from end to end, the long bones particularly. So the poorly developed muscle and lack of muscle tone due to weak abdominal muscles lead to pot belly. So there is a weakness in the muscles, so this lead to the pot belly. So the tetany is another condition wherein there are spasms involved, and wherein wrist and ankle spasm in the wrist and the ankle joints, there is a muscle twitching you can see here in this picture. So there are cramps and convulsions due to the abnormal metabolism of the calcium and phosphorus. So people have dental caries, they have delayed or the malformation of the tooth, they have low levels of calcifidiol, they have higher level of parathyroid hormone, they have increased levels of alkaline phosphatase. The dark skinned kids or the premature infants are more susceptible to rickets than the white or the full term infants. Osteomalacia, which is the form of rickets present in the adults, and mostly it is seen in the oriental people, wherein particularly during the pregnant and the lactation time. So they have mostly the softened bones of the legs, spine, thorax, pelvic regions. They lead to deformities, and they have general weakness, and they have walking problems and difficulty in climbing, and there are various fractures. So the levels of 25-hydroxy vitamin D3 in serum should be 10 to 30 nanograms per ml, and the calcitriol is 20 to 40 picograms per ml is the best index of the body stores. So most of the times doctors suggest to do the vitamin D3 ELISA, with which you can detect the deficiency of vitamin D. So the concentration of vitamin is very low, so the analytical methods, various newer analytical methods are used, such as competitive protein binding method, HPLC, and mass spectrometry. So also people used to use rats as a model system, wherein they feed these rats. So if there is no calcification is seen at the ends of the long bones, so this test so now the test diet is fed for 7 to 10 days, so that the calcium is deposited as a line in the ends of the long bones. So this is how they are checked. So these are the fish oils which are used mostly to enrich the vitamin D content in the body. So we have to understand the differences between the various conditions which are caused by vitamin D deficiency, such as osteomalacia and osteoporosis. So the osteomalacia, this is the bone size actually decrease in this case, whereas in osteoporosis the bone size remains normal. In the osteomalacia only the mineral content decrease, whereas in osteoporosis both the mineral and both the organic and the inorganic components both reduce. So such as the organic components such as the osteoblasts, osteoclasts are also decreasing in this case. So The bone composition is osteomalacia is abnormal. The bone composition is normal in osteoporosis, and osteoporosis is mostly seen in the middle-aged people around 45 years old, whereas osteomalacia is seen in the young adults. So people should take enough milk so that they can get enough supply of vitamin D. Also, people sometimes take the cod liver oil. 10 micrograms of vitamin D can be obtained from 1 teaspoon. So the toxicity is reached when you take 25 to 75 microgram per day per kilogram body weight. That would be toxic, and the symptoms include nausea, diarrhea, weight loss, polyuria, and nocturia. So also people find that there is a lot of calcification in various tissues, and there is a tissue damage happens due to that. And there is a problem in the levels of calcium, and they are treated with usually glucocorticoids. So the treatment for deficiency is high protein and high calorie diet, and this is the deficiency. During the deficiency conditions, 50 to 125 microgram of vitamin D3 per day should be taken from. So the third fat soluble vitamin is vitamin E. So this is a family of 8 naturally occurring compounds, and they are very good antioxidants, and so world over people consume a lot of this in order to because they serve as very good antioxidants, and they have possible role in stroke, cancer, heart, and immune response. So the deficiency are not very well understood in this case, but the vitamin E in the 1922 Evans and Bishop found that the female rats which require this factor in which the fat for normal pregnancy. So that's why they call this vitamin as anti-sterility vitamin. And the other name of this is tocopherol. The tocos means childbirth, and ferin means to bear the child. So you can see the vitamin E. You have a ring structure, and we have a hydroxyl group here, and you have many methyl groups, based on which they are referred to as alpha tocopherol, which has 3 methyl groups at 5, 7, and 8th position. That's why it's called as 5,7,8 trimethyl tocol. Whereas beta tocopherol has 2 methyls at 5,8. It is referred to as 5,8 dimethyl tocol, and gamma and the tocopherol has at 7th and 8th position the dimethyl groups, and the delta tocopherol has only 1 methyl at 8th position. So there are about 8 forms of tocopherol which are produced by plants, and they enter into our diet, and various forms are distinguished from the position of methyl groups on the phenyl group on the side chains, and also they state the unsaturation of the side chain. So the most active and dependent form is alpha tocopherol, and the D form is more active than the L form, and 1 mg of the D-alpha tocopherol comprises of 1.49 international units, and the hydroxyl group on the phenyl ring is essential for its activity. So these are found, the sources of vitamin E are mostly found in the vegetable oils such as plant oils, which are rich in polyunsaturated fatty acids, and also they are rich sources in they have rich sources in the grains and seeds such as in wheat germ, rice germ, cotton seeds. They are rich sources. The presence of vitamin E is in PUFA is to protect the fatty acid from oxidation, and so the relative daily allowance, the required daily allowance is about 10 and the 8 mg, 10 mg for men and 8 mg for the women per day, and 4 to 6 mg for children and teenagers, and 0.5 mg for the infants. So the requirements depends on the level of PUFAs in the diet, and they also require selenium and the presence of other antioxidants like vitamin C. So for the absorption and metabolism, the fat soluble, because being a fat soluble vitamin, bile salts are required for absorption, and this is absorbed in conjugation with fatty acids and glycerides, and it is distributed from the intestine through chylomicrons, through the lymphatic system, and it goes to the blood and liver through the very low density lipoproteins and low density lipoproteins to the peripheral tissues. So the highest concentration of this vitamin E is found in plasma, liver, and the adipose tissue. The condition, there are various conditions which may have caused the deficiency, such as cystic fibrosis, chronic bowel disease, surgical gastrectomy, and the chylomicron retention diseases because of the malabsorption and the results in the deficiency. So the vitamin E is further oxidized to quinines, and they can be excreted in the urine and serve the role as antioxidants. So they protect vitamin as a role of antioxidants. They protect vitamin A and the beta carotene from oxidation in the intestine, and they protect PUFA of membranes from auto-oxidation and peroxidation. So they are essential because they increase the lifespan of RBCs and reticulocytes for hematopoiesis. So they are required for utilization of sex hormones, cholesterol, and vitamin D. That's why they play a role as an anti-sterility factor. So the plasma levels are 0.5 mg per 100 ml is indicative of deficiency. So for deficiency can occur due to the various transfer protein disorders such as vitamin E transporter deficiency, or the malabsorption is due to the reduced intake due to the malnutrition or due to the deficiency of selenium. The major symptoms are reproductive failure, the macrolytic anemia. Macro means the cell size of the red blood cell is big and they lyse, leading to microanemia condition. They have shorter lifespan of the RBC, and it leads to creatinuria and muscular dystrophy. So that the toxicity is when you consume big doses, about 500 to 1000 mg per day for many years, up to 3 years, they may lead to toxic symptoms. So they may increase. So however, the people showed that there are decreased thyroid levels in this case and increased serum triglyceride levels. The experimental animals shows decreased vitamin K activity. They can have weakness, nausea, fatigue, as in case of other vitamin toxicities as well. So the biochemical assessment for vitamin E, it increases the membrane fragility and does increase the hemolysis of the RBC. So thereby the vitamin E content of the membrane and the degree of the lysis of the blood cells are inversely proportional. So this is done by the help of the test called hemolysis test. So wherein the amount of hemoglobin released by hemolysis, when you add the hydrogen peroxide, and when we compare this with water is measured, the percentage of hemolysis, it is calculated. The values, if it is more than 20% for hydrogen peroxide addition, indicates that vitamin E deficiency taking place. So the last fat soluble vitamin is vitamin K. It contributes to synthesis of various blood clotting factors and can be reactivated to continue the biological action. It works as a cofactor for various for enzymes for which makes the bone proteins. You can see here the structure of vitamin K1, K2, and K3. K1 referred to as phylloquinone. It was isolated from alfalfa. The K2, which is referred to as menaquinone, it was isolated from fish meal and it can be synthesized by the intestinal bacteria. And the third one, K3, doesn't have any side chains as K1 and K2, and this is most water soluble, and it is commercially synthesized and is active. And so this is the activity of this is measured in terms of the milligram or the microgram content by its ability to prevent the hemorrhage in the young chicks, because it is important for the blood cell production as well as the clot formation. The menadione is used as a standard for measuring the vitamin K potency, and it can be mostly the intestinal bacteria. They supply substantial amount of this, so you don't need to specially take this, but many of the green leaves of plants such as spinach and kale are good sources. So the efficiency at which vitamin K is absorbed is depending upon the amount of the dietary fat and the bile acids. As the other vitamins, it also requires chylomicrons and low density lipoproteins. So the functions of this is their important function in blood clotting. Particularly the vitamin K serves as cofactor in gamma carboxylation of glutamic acid residues on several of these blood clotting factors of the coagulation cascade. And the vitamin K appears to facilitate the post-transcriptional addition of the carboxyl group to the glutamic acid residues, and thereby it is involved in the preformation of thrombin structure. So this gamma carboxyl group added to in this fashion can improve the ability to form the key clotting factors to bind to the calcium ions, and thereby it forms a very hard clot. And there's another protein which is called osteocalcin, which is synthesized in the presence of vitamin K, is required for proper binding of the bone to the mineral. There are very rare cases of toxicity, so very little is known about this. So, but the vitamin K3 menadione appears to react with sulfhydryl groups of proteins and could become toxic. And the deficiency may be caused due to the intake of antibiotics in the adults, and which sterilizes the digestive tract. Infants who are born with unpopulated or sterile digestive tracts can have problem, and the people with the rat poisoning or the warfarin poisoning can have this problem. It is very difficult to measure these vitamins K1, K2 and K3, but in the people say that the blood clotting time was used to assess the vitamin K deficiency. The clotting time increases with vitamin K deficiency. The symptoms are lowered prothrombin contents of the blood, and it increased tendency to hemorrhage, and vitamin K is not effective when the liver is unable to synthesize the prothrombin. So with this, I end the fat soluble vitamins section here. Thank you.